Commission will come to order. Good evening, everybody. It's good to see all of you. We will begin with introductions. My name is Nick Neptune. I'm the chair of the City of Raleigh Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. It is 6:04, and we shall proceed with our vice chair, Commissioner Caruso.
Joe Caruso, vice chair and chair of the policy committee.
Celise Bravo-Taylor, Planning Committee.
Tammy Stern, Planning Committee.
Mary Jo Gallenbeck, Planning Committee.
Alex Rotenberry, Policy Committee.
Jeronica Goodwin, Planning Committee.
Brian Thomas, Outreach and Engagement Committee.
William Smith, newly minted commissioner.
Well, welcome, Commissioner William Smith. It is a real pleasure to have you here at our City of Raleigh Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. Before we proceed with, introductions with city staff and our Parks Board liaison, Beverly Clark, I would love to just take a moment, if Mr. Smith could, for the good of the commission, maybe share a word or two about why it is he has sought out to join us on the commission and perhaps his interest in serving on the City of Raleigh Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I'd like to thank the Mayor's Commission on People with Disabilities for nominating me, and Council Member Mary Black also nominated me, and I really appreciate that. I'm William Smith. I'm a pedestrian. That's a hard thing to call yourself. Most people won't understand exactly what I mean by that, but I grew up in Raleigh. I went to Mary E. Phillips and Aldert Root and Wiley School and what's now Oberlin Middle School and East Millbrook Junior High, and I graduated from Millbrook High School in 1982. During my high school and college career, I started having trouble seeing, and I was diagnosed with macular degeneration when I was a sophomore in college. I went to NC State, and then I finished up and got my degree at Campbell University. And I drove for 8 years. I was inducted into the Raleigh car culture, for lack of a better term. I drove. I was excited about driving, getting my license, the freedom, the independence. When I went to get my license renewed when I was 24, I couldn't pass the eye test. And within a year, I moved for Raleigh because I realized I couldn't function here. So I moved to Washington, D.C., and I lived there for 30 years. I met my wife. We had kids. My wife doesn't drive. We raised our children in suburban Washington with no car. And we were very careful about the decisions we made based on not being drivers, where we lived, the school, grocery store, church, all those places had to be proximate to where we lived so we could walk there, most of them anyway. And when we moved back, my daughter just went to NC State, and she has just had twins, and so we moved back to Raleigh. I've been gone for 35 years. But my mother and my sister live here, and I come back here all the time, and I walked a lot of Raleigh. Coming back, we would take the train and stay at the Holiday Inn, rest in peace, and we would walk different directions from there every time we came, for 2 or 3 miles. So I'm very familiar with what's going on in Raleigh on the streets with the sidewalks and crosswalks and different things like that. And as a pedestrian in Montgomery County, Maryland, I was pushing my kids around in a stroller and running into, even though they had the proximity, they didn't have the infrastructure and the enforcement and the education. So I'm a big believer in those 3 E's: enforcement, education, and not infrastructure. What's the other one? Engineering. I guess that's what 30 is. And I've learned a lot from not being a driver because speed alters perception. And if you're in a car all the time, if everywhere you go in a car, you lose some perception. And For example, most people, if you ask a person who walks a distance versus a person who drives it regularly, the person who drives it will tell you it's further away than the person who walks it. If you talk to somebody who drives all the time and you ask them how far away something is, they'll tell you how many minutes it is away, not how many miles it is away. Because drivers lose perception of how far things are away from each other. And believe it or not, Raleigh's got a lot of proximity and things that people who grew up in Raleigh in the culture don't realize it. You can walk from North Hills to Crabtree Valley and it won't kill you. I promise, because I've done it since we've lived here 2 or 3 times now. And it's actually a really nice walk. And there are lots of places in Raleigh where people could walk if the infrastructure was there. And people are not walking because things are too far away. People are not walking because it's not safe. Safety is a function of access. It's not something you do just to be doing it. You do it so that people can access the right-of-way and participate in public life in the largest single public space in the city, which is the right-of-way. I could go on for another half an hour, but that we have meetings coming up, and I'll be happy to add, what I can from this perspective.
Commissioner Smith, I dare say that the commission will join me in acknowledging how grateful we are to have you in joining us in our efforts to work together with our colleagues on staff, with our colleagues on council, and our greater community to make improvements in our public infrastructure so that people increasingly feel safe leaving their homes, walking, biking, or scooting around this city. Ultimately, that's what we're here for. We are all volunteers, as we have taken to reminding folks, we are all here as volunteers with a city council appointment. And on that note, I'd like to thank Councilmember Mary Black for this very thoughtful appointment to our commission. But ultimately, we're all volunteers here who share in that value that I think you've conveyed just so clearly and eloquently, in wanting to see improved and expanded public infrastructure that encourages active modes of transportation around this city. People should not have to rely on a car to get around, right? That's just the bottom line, especially, with all that we know today about all the benefits with regard to our health and wellness, physical, environmental, et cetera. So, as you said, with that, we do have a full meeting ahead of us. Before we proceed, real quick, if we could have introductions from city staff, and perhaps we'll wrap up with Ms. Clark, and then we'll head on into the approval of the minutes.
Barbara Godwin, Transportation Staff.
Will Shoemaker, Transportation Staff.
Beverly Clark, member of the Parks, Recreation, Greenway Advisory Board.
Thank you. Up next, we have the approval of our minutes from our previous meeting. I trust that our friends and colleagues here have had a chance to review. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
We've got a motion to approve from Commissioner Goodwin. Do I hear? Oh,
I think we have to have 2 motions because there's 2 meeting minutes we need to approve. So I think we need to be a little more specific with our motion.
thank you, Mr. Rotenberry. Love that attention to detail. Big fan of that.
Big fan.
Truly. Well, then, yes, we do need to have 2 separate motions. So well, I think we have a motion to approve, Ms. Goodwin, our minutes from the previous meeting from February.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to focus on the February 19th meeting minutes. Do I have a second to approve those minutes? Oh, I've got a second from Commissioner Thomas. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the minutes from February 19th, my mother's birthday, have been approved. Up next, do I hear an approval motion for our minutes from our January 22nd meeting? Commissioner Rotenberry.
I will make that motion.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner Rotenberry, for the approval of the minutes from January 22nd. Do I hear a second to that motion? Second. Second from Commissioner Goodwin. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the approval of the minutes from January 22nd has passed. Would also like to acknowledge that I believe Commissioner Bravo Taylor may have had a birthday recently. Would like to say happy birthday to Commissioner Bravo Taylor. Also, my apologies if I've missed any other birthdays in March or February or January. That is. Hey, Commissioner Thomas had a birthday. Make some noise for Commissioner Thomas. I tell you what, he's been doing some good work with the outreach and engagement. I'm just saying. That's right. That's right. Any other birthdays? Any other birthdays?
I had one in February.
Hey, Commissioner Rodenberry had a birthday. How about that? Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner, I'm sorry. Miss Godwin, could we make a note of all these birthdays, please? I want to make sure that we are keeping these on the record for celebration annually. Okay, thank you. All right, up next, we're going to proceed with public comment. Do we have any members of the public here to make a comment? If so, please feel welcome to approach the podium. I'm not seeing anybody approach, so it looks like we might be able to proceed past public comment. Going once, going twice, moving on to our presentations for the evening. Up first, very excited to have this presentation on equitable development around transit. We have our friend and colleague here who will introduce herself and share with us this terrific presentation.
Good evening. Hannah Reckow with Planning and Development. I'm joined by my colleague Sarah Shaughnessy, also with Planning and Development. We're going to talk through equitable development around transit, start at sort of the context for this topic, talk through the what we call the EDAT study process itself, the recommendations that came out of that process, some of the implementation steps that have happened so far, and then dive a little deeper into one of those BRT station area planning. So, starting with the context, I'm sure as all of us are familiar, Raleigh is growing and has been growing since the 1950s. So population growth, we're projected to be reach 600,000 by 2035, but also growth in the area of Raleigh. And those two things together have meant a less densely developed Raleigh as time goes on. Add to that new investment in transit through the Wake County Transit Plan, especially bus rapid transit. Bus rapid transit is going to be really essential to support the growth that we've already had, but also the growth that we anticipate continuing into the future. These two facts together raises a question for the city, which is how do we want to grow into the future? Continue to grow as we have around cars, driving, car infrastructure, or shift, make a pivot, and start to grow more around the transit infrastructure that we're going to be investing in. So the city sought out to address this question through a process that would form the foundation of a lot of other work around BRT. Equitable development around transit, you'll see this acronym, I'll refer to it as EDAT. It was a process similar to a lot of other planning processes, took place in 2019, had a pretty robust public engagement, a variety of different ways of getting out, and we had a lot of people participate in this process. And kind of the highlights of what we heard was a really overwhelming support for the concept of starting to grow more around transit. And that we heard an interest in that concept in general, an interest and support for the implication of greater density near transit, and also heard that Raleigh really values that development be equitable, and that means greater safety, safe walkable streets, greater safety, more comfortable infrastructure, that's a key part of equitable development around transit. So some of the goals that came out of this process sort of highlight what is meant by equitable development around transit are a focus on affordability, minimizing displacement where that might happen, preserving businesses, existing businesses, but also generating more opportunities for jobs to locate near transit, pedestrian safety, that being a key part of how people will access it, and then the support for growing around transit and having more of the city's future growth be accommodated near transit and near bus rapid transit. And then another key part of this is that we're not just going to set this and forget it. It's something new for the city, so the process of measuring results and returning to it again to tweak it in the future if need be. is a key part of it. So recommendations coming out of EDAT, a central one is the Equitable Transit-Oriented Development Guidebook, which I'll talk a little bit more about. There were also amendments to the comprehensive plan, so the main guide for the city's growth. And then more broadly, the EDAT recommendations are the framework for the stationary planning that has come after it and that will come in the future. To touch on the guidebook again, this document did a few things. One was to define what is meant by equitable transit-oriented development, and then to also identify some tools which range in kind of format and include zoning tools, which is where the transit overlay district work came from. Before diving into those components a little bit more, I did want to take a step back and kind of appreciate how much collaboration is going to be needed to implement this. These really range city departments. They are greater than the sum of their parts and kind of as multifaceted as the issue is. I'm sure everyone on the commission is sort of familiar with a lot of these concepts, but in terms of kind of design principles for what transit-oriented development looks like, this is encouraging uses to locate together, so encouraging shorter trips and greater access to destinations, increasing the destinations that exist around stations, and then how we use the space we have, locating uses that are going to support transit use near transit infrastructure, and creating safe but also really enjoyable, vibrant places nearby. And then the comprehensive plan amendments I mentioned, this is a document that is the guide for the city's growth. It covers a lot of topics. And there were a number of amendments to the document as part of EDAT. Some kind of central ones for growth are the growth framework map and the future land use map. And there's also a new section around equitable transit around development, map LU5 you see here, providing additional guidance that aligns the recommendations, or aligns our comprehensive plan with those recommendations. And so this is building in to how the city council reviews requests that come before them for changes to the zoning map. So that this guiding document now guiding the regulatory side towards equitable development around transit principles. On the regulatory side, I mentioned the transit overlay district. This was a big piece of work that came out of EDAT. We had one on the books, but the work was to amend it so that it is doing more and better work for us, discouraging more dispersed and car-oriented uses along transit BRT corridors especially, and encouraging a more walkable form, in a lot of cases requiring it, and encouraging a mix of uses, new jobs and housing locating in those areas, and especially affordable housing near transit too. So some kind of dates and timelines about this work. The revisions to the overlay were adopted in 2021. The city then initiated rezoning requests along the western BRT and southern BRT corridors to apply the overlay. Those were adopted in the following year. And then roughly the same time, the New Bern BRT stationary planning process was ongoing. And so as part of that process, they were looking at where to apply the TOD along that corridor. And that process is in front of City Council currently. So the TOD and some of the other stationary planning work has been adopted. And then there's other base zoning districts that the council's still considering. Another piece in the sort of the regulatory category is the frequent transit development option. So this is a new option in the city's UDO that allows some greater flexibility around to build more housing in areas near transit. So there's also a affordability incentive built into that. You can get a certain entitlement, and then if you want to go beyond that, there's a requirement. There would be a requirement to provide affordable units. And we haven't had the TOD applied in the city for very long, so sort of the impact of that is sort of to be seen. But we have seen some, measure some projects coming out of the FTDO. And so this is just kind of a sampling of what we've seen so far, both market rate and affordable units. On a lot of cases, it's smaller, which is sort of the goal of the FTDO is so smaller scale density in existing residential areas that are near maybe not BRT, but other frequent transit routes. And so I'll shift a little bit towards other programs that came out of this project. A number of city projects programs focused on kind of displacement concerns, business stabilization. I'll highlight just a few of those. Homeowner rehabilitation assistance, so money that homeowners can use when they want to stay in their house, but the sort of status of it might otherwise push them to seek different housing. And then assistance with homeownership costs, education around predatory practices. So really just resources to help people who want to stay in their homes in these areas do so. The Public Project Community Support Fund, which has a very long name, is another sort of innovation that came out of the ETOD guidebook. So this is funding that's made available in areas where, in recognition that public investments may cause some disruption. So a number of grants have already been awarded in this project, and there's work to build in more infrastructure to the program so they can have continued funding in the future. And then finally, I'll turn to stationary planning. This is work that covers a number of topics and is really aimed at developing a community vision for growth and development in the area, identifying infrastructure that is needed to supplement the existing infrastructure so people can have access to BRT, and then looking at land use policy, regulation, seeing if there are tweaks that need to be made to allow to increase access to this infrastructure. So sort of status currently, as I mentioned, the New Bern BRT stationary planning is in progress at the end of the process, so Council is considering some recommendations coming out of there currently at a public hearing. The Western BRT and Southern BRT stationary planning processes are both in progress, kind of right in the middle of the process, and I can talk more about that in a moment. And then the Northern BRT transit development is still in the major investment study stage, so stationary planning would come later once there's greater certainty about the actual route and alignment. And then this is just a visual. Again, we're talking about these two routes as being currently in progress, both connecting downtown with a neighboring jurisdiction, both passing by a number of schools, universities, existing commercial centers, and many, many neighborhoods. So the scope of this work is looking at a number of topics, as I mentioned. A key piece of that is the first and last mile mobility. So can people physically get to the stations? And beyond that, beyond safety, is it comfortable and inviting and like the obvious choice in that area? And then affordability, housing affordability, we want that access to be equitable. Don't want only it to be, don't want housing prices to price people out. Want to address people's concerns about displacement. And similarly looking at small business support, stabilization efforts that may be needed. And then any amendments to zoning, land use, urban design, policies, regulations that can further support the equitable access to BRT. And then at the core of that is equitable engagement. We really can't have a successful process if we're not really reaching the people that live in the corridor and could be using this service. So project timeline, as I mentioned, Western and Southern stationary planning processes are running kind of parallel. We had 2 phases of general engagement pushes out to the public, one in December, which was focused on existing conditions, finding out what we can about these areas and what's working, what's not. And then another second phase last month in February, bringing out some very preliminary ideas for recommendations and kind of continuing our learning about and connecting with the communities. So looking forward, we're doing some more targeted outreach along each of these corridors to really make sure we're getting plugging into existing organizations and expect that sort of a next phase of engagement with more full sort of draft recommendations would happen early in the summer of this year. So I think that is the overview that I have. Really welcome your thoughts and here to answer questions if you have them.
Ms. Reckow, first of all, thank you for sharing the sort of overview of the equitable development around transit plan. Just briefly, I'd like to note, so often it's easy for whether it be members of our own commission or members of the public to lean in to eloquently describing the challenges that we are confronted with as a growing community. And it is important to be able to articulate those challenges, right? But I think the real follow-through is identifying the solutions and ideas as it relates to how we're going to address that growth. And it really means a lot to me to see the city leaning into adopting a plan such as this, right, which addresses housing, transit, walkability, bikeability. I mean, this is the type of thinking we want to see. And so, again, just briefly, appreciate you being here tonight on behalf of our colleagues with the city, with city planning, sharing this with us tonight. With that, I'd like to open it up for any questions, comment, thoughts from the commission.
Quick question. Great presentation, and I agree, it really does address social determinants. To that vein, what's been the engagement or the participation in survey or gathering data? Is it a good participation rate, and are there different methods that you guys will use to make sure that you include as many people as possible?
Do you mean of stationary planning or the?
Yes, stationary planning.
Yeah, it's been it's a challenge. It can be a challenge.
Yeah.
We've definitely have had turnout, good to okay turnout, which is why we're taking a good amount of time to do some more targeted outreach.
Okay.
But there is definitely a lot of interest. I think Sarah can speak to this, especially along the Western corridor. The Southern is a little bit more of a challenge since it is so much more commercial than the Western. There's a lot of businesses and a lot of car-oriented businesses too. So that type of engagement can be a challenge.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, I think so much of this work sort of got going around the same time as the pandemic was unfolding. If I'm not mistaken, is that fair to say?
Yeah, the EDEP process happened just before. But yeah, we have had to pivot in our planning approach to engagement generally.
Okay, I just asked that question just to make sure that the city really gets a good baseline of information and not make a decision based on a small sample size, because this is just so critical to access. So just to make sure that participant number is adequate.
100%, yeah.
I think more recently, you've had several in-person events to gather information, particularly on the southern corridor, which I've been more interested in at Peach Road Park and at Carolina Pines Park. I know I've seen activity there. So
Yeah, for both corridors, we've had in-person open houses of sort of virtual equivalent of that, and then pop-up events good luck with that. Yeah.
It's my understanding that transit-oriented development is designed to allow you to create density in areas and not have to suffer the traffic. Is there something in the plan about what these development sites will do with their parking? Are they going to have 3 or 4 parking spots per unit, or I think ordinarily transit-oriented development, you'd want to cut the amount of parking, and if for no other reason, to encourage people to use the transit. And also, if you put 1,000 people into a building and 10% of them use transit, then you're going to actually make traffic worse. I was just wondering what the thought was on that, what the thought process is.
So thinking about parking is definitely a part of the sort of design principles outlined in the guidebook. Using our space near these corridors for people, right, and encouraging, discouraging kind of that type of a use. There's a couple of things I wanted to touch on. The transit overlay district itself does require a certain kind of pedestrian friendly orientation. Want to get into the weeds? It's through zoning frontage. And I've just lost my train of thought. Hold on. Parking. Yeah, so the city had, in the meantime, removed parking minimums from the Unified Development Ordinance, and for some uses there are maximums currently. So I think citywide there's an interest or understanding that there's a shift in thinking about parking, but being mindful of that is definitely part of the principles in the guidebook.
Not an expert on parking, but cities like DC, which I'm from, go underground for parking so that you're not interrupting pedestrian and residential flow. So just, I don't know, Raleigh, if we're moving in that direction, but that seems to be something that larger cities consider.
Yeah, that is definitely something that's possible under the UDO. It is expensive, to my understanding. So that might be something that the market is maybe not there yet for all of the city.
The TOD, though, is allowing developers to build projects with a density that is greater than you would ordinarily allow if you didn't have the transit there. Is that correct?
The overlay district is requiring, is making, I'm trying to remember if I have a backup slide on this. I don't. It's regulating development in a few ways. It's prohibiting more car-oriented forms, so things like drive-throughs and certain land uses. It's allowing a little bit more flexibility on other restrictions in the UDO. And then there are built-in building height bonuses, which allow you to build beyond what your zoning has for height. One is for location of employment uses, and the other is for providing affordable housing units. So in that way, it is allowing you to go beyond the base
So
district.
the developers, do they get a break on their environmental impact study? Is that what happens?
No, it doesn't deal with that at all.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. One is around, you mentioned the frequent transit development option. Could you talk a little bit more about that? And kind of the context of my question is that a lot of, at least from what I've seen, this kind of entire project or process is largely focused around BRT, which makes sense, but kind of by definition, BRT will be a small percentage of overall city of Raleigh, and we have quite a number of either current or planned areas that will see frequent transit, but not BRT. Like I know Route 11 down Avon Ferry is going to be frequent, and others which aren't necessarily adjacent to BRT. So can you talk a little bit about what triggers that option and what bonuses do you get and all of those types of things?
Sure, yeah. And I switched to this slide because this map is kind of a key piece of it. So exactly to your point, BRT is a smallish part of the city, and there is still a number of corridors that have transit currently and are going to have greater investment in the future. So the FTDO is a possibility currently by right in certain areas that are deemed a frequent transit area. And so those are, you see the thick red lines on this map are designating the frequent transit corridors. And there's I think it's a quarter-mile buffer around those corridors where if you're in that area, you have this new development option opened up. And what that does is it changes the dimensional requirements for residential development. So the size of the lot you need, setbacks, things of that nature, and creates more flexibility in residential development in those areas. So that, and that's to kind of target your duplexes, triplexes, small apartment buildings, things that in scale can fit in an existing neighborhood but aren't technically allowed otherwise in the UDO. And I mentioned that there was thought to thinking about scale in those neighborhoods. So there's a cap of 12 units on those types of development, which you can go beyond if you provide affordable units. So there's another incentive there for affordable units.
Okay. So I guess just some clarity. So the primary, or I guess only bonus or benefit is there is some allowances on kind of building form and building type. There's not like other types of things. That's just kind of the main category.
Yes.
Okay. And then I had a question about I don't even know where it'd be under, I guess, stationary plan, but kind of with the TOD overlay itself, and I get a lot of these things are very intertwined and kind of overlap, but like with the TOD overlay for areas where that's applied, are there any kind of changes that either require or kind of strongly incentivize more bike and ped infrastructure, or are we mostly relying on whatever frontages are applied? And if not, kind of how is staff thinking about that? Because I know we've kind of as the commission, we've kind of talked about this in policy committee quite a number of times about figuring out how to get the bike and ped piece as part of the TOD, and it seems a bit complicated, and there's not really a clear answer. So are those things kind of in progress, and or kind of what is the general thoughts on staff about that?
Okay, so I had to find my train of thought again. I'm sorry. In the TOD, one of the requirements is to, if there isn't currently a zoning frontage on the property, develop with one of the urban frontages, or develop with an urban frontage. I can look at those details if we want to go into that. So there's that frontage, urban frontage, has a higher standard for pedestrian access to the site.
Okay.
Hi, Sarah Shaughnessy. I work with Hannah in planning and development. I also wanted to add that as part of the station area planning process, we're looking at first and last mile activity and safety of access to BRT stations, and within the neighborhoods surrounding the stations, looking at recommendations to improve intersections, bike ped connectivity. So that's not technically within the TOD. It wouldn't be a zoning thing, but it would be a planning thing, like a facet of the planning process that would then potentially become part of the CIP, or we're thinking through what implementation looks like, and it's part of this whole process. So that's sort of like in the neighborhoods surrounding the stations. But the BRT design, so the actual right-of-way along South Wilmington Street and Western Boulevard and New Bern Avenue, and then whatever route the northern route takes, will also include sidewalks and modifications to accommodate sort of a complete street perspective within the design. So that's more planning and project-based and not as tied to the TOD, but is, an improvement to multimodal safety and connectivity.
Right. Okay. So I guess just so I understand, so at least as far as the TOD overlay itself is concerned, there's not kind of specific bike ped triggers there, but they their enforcement basically comes from requiring an urban frontage,
Yeah, it's mostly tied to land use and like building form. That's sort of the zoning tools that we have as part of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah? Okay, thank you. I am interested in the user experience in accessing the BRT and the development planning for that. And so when you're engaging with the community at large, are you inquiring about what their needs are that would make walking or biking to the stations amenable?
Yes, that is a central question.
And so what are how do you extract that information out of the general public? How do you extract the details that they are envisioning that will make them feel confident to be walking in the environment that you're building or creating?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a mix of asking directly what would help you access BRT, and also inquiring kind of more generally, like where in this area feels unsafe, and sort of details like that. And I think as we go through the process, I think there's an opportunity to look back and once we have draft recommendations to kind of double check and say, do you agree that this list of projects would help you access BRT? So from start to finish, kind of make sure we're on the same page with the public.
Okay, because walking along motor vehicle traffic that's traveling at 45 miles per hour is not a positive experience. So if we over-abuse the word safety constantly, then we're undermining the physical awareness of what it feels like to be a pedestrian or a bicycle rider in those high-speed corridors. And so to intermix those different speeds of travel, I think is a dangerous combination. And so what I'm trying, so I just want to underscore how important it is to extract what they need, not to be safe, but to feel confident and comfortable. And then the BRT is going to be along motor vehicle traffic, correct? So those speeds are going to be traveling at 45 miles per hour if they're following the speed limit, correct?
Yeah,
and it typically will be 2 lanes, one way of motor vehicle traffic.
It varies
each direction
along both corridors. There's a portion of, actually both Western and Southern have extensions to the route. So on Southern, the South Wilmington extension will be, I believe the plan is one bus route, one bus lane, one car lane, and then the pedestrian bicycle infrastructure.
Okay.
So it varies along the corridor is kind of the answer.
Yeah, that would be amenable and keeping the motor vehicle traffic at a traffic calming speed And once we get to two lanes in the same direction, then we lose control of it. And the objective is to really make driving as physically uncomfortable as it might be to walk. Because that, right now, driving is the most comfortable mode of travel. And so people do it because they have to or because they prefer the advantages of it. And we need to really kind of identify how to balance those advantages so that each mode of transportation has its same value in the eye of the public. So we want to be able to have the freedom to choose which one we want and not be forced, right? Okay. And then the units that we're building, these buildings, is the city considering the proportion of units that should be built for families? For example, 2 or 3 bedroom units outnumber 1 bedroom unit or studio apartments, so that we're accommodating families in these high-dense urban environments.
So to my knowledge, there isn't anything in place currently to direct that. It's sort of the market providing, but
Yeah.
that type of question
Good
is
question.
absolutely within, I think, the topic of station area planning. So if, I can imagine us getting feedback like that there isn't enough housing for families, or there isn't a different type of housing that we need to see. So
Yeah.
that is stuff we want to hear.
Yeah, because my understanding is that 25% of the morning traffic is generated just by families taking their children to the public school system. And so in these buildings, when you're identifying who's going to be occupying it, retail, business, are you guys considering Wake County Public Schools and collaborating and building a partnership with them so that they find that this is an opportunity for them to build new schools, to accommodate those families that are moving into these units? And then we're reducing the need for even travel, in that capacity, to use a motorized vehicle.
So just to clarify, the city isn't, this isn't describing city projects necessarily. The TOD areas are principles that we want to implement and have the market implement as well. But we are interested in working with the schools. That's definitely on our radar. I know the Southern Route itself has 2 public schools along it, like right along the corridor. So that is definitely an interest of both Sarah and I.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that this is being discussed today, so that 5 years down the road, we're not discussing it then.
Sure.
Time is of the essence, and we don't want to waste any of it, right? Thank you for listening.
Ms. Rotenberry.
Thank you for the presentation this evening. Really appreciate it. I'm going to get a little technical because I'm a planner, so maybe these will be right up your all's wheelhouse. I'm kind of curious to know, you talked, to some extent about the performance measures, that are in the plan. And I'm kind of curious to know, like, how do you judge yourself on those? Have you done an analysis yet? Is the plan still too new, or have you guys actually started to, grade yourself on how it's going? And if so, are those public?
So it's still very new, but we are building the infrastructure to measure, to keep track and record and measure that. I don't know if, do you have any comments on?
No, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we are tracking the number of developments that use the frequent development transit option and the number of affordable units that are produced as a result of some of these zoning changes. I think that's sort of the baseline. And then, like Hannah said, we're working on developing additional tools to track the success of those projects and the policies in these plans. We are about to embark on an update to our comprehensive plan, sort of a redo of a new comprehensive plan. And I think metrics and tracking will be, as far as the effectiveness of all of our policies, will be really key to that.
Thank you. I'm curious to know, is there a good example of how this policy has been used before? I'm thinking of the social media for Raleigh recently, or maybe it was Go Triangle, was talking about the RUS station, and it got me thinking about that when you all were presenting, because that's publicly funded, at least in part, project that will incorporate, I think, not just a hotel, but also some living units in it. And so I'm wondering if maybe this TOD, even though it's, I guess, technically not in the BRT route of any of the routes, if that policy, this policy you presented on this evening was a good example of that, or if you could just expound on, the process on a current or recently completed project. These are supposed to be easy, sorry.
It's okay. I'm trying to remember kind of the timeline. I think that project might have been in the pipeline at the same time or prior to these projects. I don't know that I can think of an example right off the bat. Again, just because it's been so, it's very recent. The TOD has only been applied in the map for less than 2 years now. So there's a lot to be seen. But I think it's a really good question, and one that the city is interested in, of like how we're going to measure success and how we know that we're getting the results that are good enough.
If you have any, would it be possible for you to give those to our BPAC representatives on city staff? I'd be very interested in kind of looking at an evaluation if one has been done so far.
I don't think one has been done. I think we're
not
just,
a one, okay.
I think we're still collecting
Shucks.
the data to see, the units that are being constructed under these new options.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And last, very easy one, I hope. So this project is now, this plan is now about 4 years old, and typical lifespan of a plan is about 5 years. So I'm curious to know, are you already thinking about an update to this?
So the EDAP plan is kind of unique in that it's about kind of concepts and buy-in from the community. So it's really the initial work that was done prior to all these other moving pieces. So I think we're still in the process of implementing it and seeing how it's going to serve Raleigh. So no plans that I'm aware of to revisit it currently.
Thank you all very much. Really appreciate it.
Ms. Clark.
Forgive my ignorance on this, because this has been a very helpful learning experience, but I'm picturing the need for a chart that differentiates the difference between the TOD and the FTDO. And I think that what Mr. Caruso was asking about, I think this question is a follow-up to that. And I see the components of equity in the TOD. I see the components of bike and ped infrastructure in TOD. I don't see, and maybe it's me missing it, that those same components are existing in the frequent transit development option. Because it can be an isolated pocket because it's within a half a mile, but if you've got a pocket of intense development with no connectivity to your possible transit, then it's very different than the whole transit overlay district. So can you help me understand that that chart is correct?
Yeah, just to kind of put it in perspective, what you get from the FTDO is much smaller than what you get from the TOD. And so the aim there is to acknowledge that there's a pretty good bus network outside of BRT, where there either is currently is frequent transit or is programmed to be in the future, and accommodating kind of a smaller amount of growth in those areas. I don't know if that speaks to your question, but that's kind of the approach.
Yeah, that does answer my question in large part, but I think for the public, it would be helpful to demonstrate those two, because they get blurred together, and I think it's impairing the support for the TOD because some of the weaknesses of the FTDO get implied to the other, and so I think it's important that the distinctions be drawn so that people know where one applies and where the other applies.
Yeah, I agree. I think it definitely would be helpful. I mean, I think at least my understanding is that broadly speaking, the distinction is really like the TOD overlay, at least as currently envisioned, is exclusive to the BRT corridors, and then the F, whatever we're calling it, the frequent one is everything else, right? So I think, I mean, I totally agree that like having maps and visual aids is generally super helpful, but I think like that's kind of the primary distinction currently. That being said, I mean, I do think that like it would be, to Mr. Rotenberry's point, like kind of where we move next, I think it certainly would be helpful to kind of think about what, the next whatever time frame, 10 years or so, looks like for these frequent transit corridors, because at least somewhat by design, the frequent program is quite small, and I think we may kind of paint ourselves into trouble if we have such a disparity between BRT being this like ultimate, super premium service, at least that's how we kind of plan for it and envision it, versus our quote unquote local bus service, which is kind of not given the same emphasis. And so, yeah, I mean, but I think it also gets into a problem of like a lot of these things. We also don't want to have all of these kind of special goodies be in these specific programs. Like a lot of these things, frankly, just should be applied everywhere, and not like a number of these things where you get a bonus, you get an extra unit or two bonus if you're next to a frequent transit. Like I think I would argue that like that should just be the case everywhere. Like, I mean, within reason, but like, but yeah, I think kind of looking forward, it would definitely be helpful to kind of further build out what the frequent transit planning process looks like, and not be solely focused on BRT as kind of our only kind of transit development or primary transit development activity.
Any further comment, question from the commission? Well, hearing none, I'd like to thank again our colleagues from City Planning for joining us tonight to speak to the equitable development around transit plan. I think that by and large there's a lot of appreciation for again having this in place, though we are clearly just getting started and there's still work to be done and progress to be seen. At the end of the day, we have we've gotten the ball rolling, and I think that that's appreciated. And again, we're all in this together. So many thanks to our colleagues on staff for joining us tonight. We appreciate you. Thank you. Up next, we have a presentation from our own Miss Godwin about the bicycle lane sweeper pilot project. I think we have a whole review coming up, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you, Miss Godwin.
Good evening, Commissioners. Barbara Godwin with the Transportation Department. Excited to be here tonight to talk to you all about the updates from our bike lane sweeper pilot that we conducted last year. So a little bit of background, it's a really great image on this pilot. So as the city started to sort of change how we build out our all ages and abilities bike facilities, we discovered that separated bike facilities really require a specialized form of maintenance aside from our regular street maintenance. So we started having some discussions with our street maintenance colleagues about how we better invest in maintenance equipment and materials that will help us work through our flexi posts that are really our current method of separating in-street bike facilities. So invested in some specialized multi-hog sweeper equipment around 2020. And we're able to deploy it over the last several years, sort of on an ad hoc basis, but really wanted to start understanding what the consistent maintenance needs would be to really have a positive impact on keeping our bike lanes clear of debris. So in 2023, we worked with BPAC to establish an ad hoc committee, which was really meant to select the separated bike facilities in the city upon which we would try this pilot out on and track that data from. So that lasted about 6 months. So just some information for you on really the structure of that pilot. It started in May of last year and went through October of 2023. So decided to conclude the pilot as leaf collection season kicked off in the city so that we had good data that really tells us outside of our normal leaf collection time what this maintenance need really looks like. So we started the program with 2 of our multi-hog bike lane sweepers. And unfortunately, very early in the pilot, one of the sweepers was damaged. So throughout the entirety of the pilot, we really only had 1 good quality bike lane sweeper. Additionally, we have 0 dedicated staff on our street maintenance team whose sole responsibility is bike lane maintenance. So really, their time was allocated to this as they were available over the 6-month pilot period. So the ad hoc committee of BPAC selected these 6 streets, those being Crabtree Boulevard, Limeberry Drive, Gorman Street, Harrington Street, West Street, and Morgan Street. So 3 more suburban-esque type streets and 3 that were downtown. 5 of those have the flexible delineators. Gorman Street, sections of Gorman Street are just buffered bike lanes. So this chart really provides you just an overview of all the participant streets that were a part of the pilot. Again, ranging from some more suburban streets to our downtown corridors. Additionally, you'll note that we have a few one-way pairs that were included as part of Harrington and West Street and Morgan Street as well. And then separated bike lanes on either side of the road with Crabtree, Limeberry, and Gorman Street. So a lot of information up here, but I think what I really want to hone in on is that the areas that were in sort of this more tree-covered suburban location, you can see took quite a bit longer to complete on an average basis than some of our downtown connections. So Crabtree Boulevard and Limeberry really sticking out here as some of the more costly and timely maintained facilities. A lot of that making a large assumption due to some of that more natural tree cover that's in those areas, just a different kind of debris that clogs up in certain parts of those facilities compared to our downtown streets, which is a very different kind of maintenance. So highlighting some key takeaways from this pilot, the first being really is we were able to increase the frequency of sweeping each facility, the number of hours of time that it took to fully sweep that facility decreased. Additionally, until we get dedicated staff for bike lane maintenance, the effectiveness of the sweeps is not fully there. So that's kind of one of the big takeaways, I think, from my perspective. Additionally, we heard from our street maintenance team that the current equipment that we have, the multi-hog sweeper, really does successfully meet the needs that they have for cleaning these facilities. So that was also a really good takeaway. They got to spend a lot of more time using this. So lastly, I want to just talk about some next steps. So I mentioned earlier in the presentation that one of our pieces of equipment was damaged. So our street maintenance team is in the process of testing some new equipment to replace that damaged sweeper. They have a couple of demonstrations in April where they're actually going to be testing some all-electric sweepers. So very excited about that. And then additionally, just as we have more conversations with them about how we can effectively build all ages and abilities biking facilities while continuing to work with them and their existing equipment, I think we're always trying to come up with really strategic designs and strategies. Thinking of testing out new materials ourselves with our program, different from the vertical delineators that we use now. So that's all I have for you this evening. Happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Godwin. Any questions, comment from the commission? Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Godwin. Can we go back to the slide, the table that showed the hours and cost there? So for Gorman Street, since it doesn't have the vertical delineators, is that what reduced the cost or the time it took per sweep there? Because I would expect it to be similar to Lineberry and Crabtree since it's got a pretty heavy tree canopy along that area.
That was my first reaction as well.
Okay.
I do believe without the vertical delineators, debris naturally moves away more towards the curb. But yes, that is my understanding.
Okay. And 19 and 3/4 hours, that seems like a long time to complete, one sweep. That's, more than 2.5 days. So, and the crews felt like the equipment there was adequate for that section as well?
That's correct. So just a quick note about some of this data. The average time to complete includes the time it took for operators to take the equipment, go off-site to their facility where they drop the debris that they've picked up, and then go back to the site and continue cleaning. That's factored in as well.
Okay, thank you.
When you look at the numbers, Crabtree was 1 mile, took 9 hours. Lineberry's 2 miles, a little over 19 hours. It's not that far. It's only an hour more, or an hour and 45 minutes. So it's not like significantly jumped. Yeah, for the distance. Like the Gorman Street at almost 2 miles, that was 4 hours. That seems like that.
So just to clarify, on the Gorman Street, is that the section kind of referred to as the Gorman Street connector over the railroad tracks? Because there's bike lanes down south end too. So which section of Gorman are we talking about here?
It's the southern section. It's not
the bridge.
Correct.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It was the buffered bike lanes in street.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
One more note about Gorman Street. So because there are no flexible delineators, these were also getting swept through normal street sweeping, which is not accounted for in this data, which is also a contributor to this, taking significantly less time than Crabtree Boulevard and Lineberry.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. I do wonder, I think a lot of this is probably going to be dependent on, or we need to have kind of more data to make real conclusions. But I do wonder how much of this is kind of skewed by, especially on Lineberry, I know, like, there's a lot of trees right there that just kind of dump in the lanes, and like, I wonder how much of this is skewed by, like, if we took like well, yeah, if we trim the trees, or if we if they went through with the leaf machine the first time and then kept it up with the smaller machine, like if that would kind of dramatically drop the times, on some of these more suburban areas where there's super heavy tree cover. I wonder how much of this is kind of an artifact of it not being frequent. And if it was frequent, then a lot of these numbers would look different.
I definitely think that that's a very real possibility. Just in one of my notes here, as they continued to sweep with more frequency, the number of hours it took decreased. So if there was a more established consistency to how they were getting swept, I do think we would see a difference.
And what does multi-hog mean? I don't know, I'm not familiar with that term.
So that is actually the name of the equipment that you see here on the right.
Like the brand or something, or like the
Yes.
type? Okay.
It's the type, yes.
I have a question. It's about staff. Can you explain why we don't have someone dedicated to it?
So
Money?
currently, our street maintenance division is allocated in several other types of work. Hannah actually got to go do a ride along with some of our street maintenance colleagues and got a lot of exposure to the many different facets of work that they do. During leaf collection season, I believe all resources that they have on hand go towards leaf collection, or most. So that's a big part of sort of that staffing component for half of the year, November through March. But they have not added a dedicated staff specific to bike lane maintenance. I believe there's other areas of maintenance outside of this one in particular that they're also very limited in being able to deploy resources to.
Are they planning on hiring somebody to dedicate? Is there enough? There should be enough work to be able to support it a year round. Is that on the discussion? Is that being explored? I'm just trying to understand what the strategy is.
I'll jump in to not put staff in a weird spot. It's a budget issue. Like, at the end of the day, I think it's a money issue. Like, council has to appropriate the funds. Like, that's really at the end of the day what the issue is. But yeah, like I know that they also have issues with keeping up with the painting and the markings. Like you said, there's more work than people. So that's the impression that I've got.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'd still like to hear from Barbara. Insiders. I'm not trying to make it awkward, Joe. I'm curious to know what you guys are talking about.
So at this time, I think the desire is to, long-term fill several of these different areas of need in their division outside of bike lane
before the
maintenance.
bike lane?
Not necessarily, just in general. At this point in time, we do not have a plan necessarily foreseeable where they will be hiring a dedicated person, but that does come down to numbers and funding and just ongoing maintenance needs across their group as well.
So we bought these sweepers. We intended to have 2 working sweepers, but for unforeseen reasons, we're down to 1. And the maintenance staff would use them periodically when they had people available?
That's correct.
That was the planning when we purchased them.
That's correct.
So they could sit there if maintenance doesn't have it on their schedule. What I'm trying to flesh out is what's the priority on keeping bike lanes clear and free of debris that could cause the general public to not use them or endanger somebody who's using it.
Is that something that maybe this commission could advocate
Yeah,
for?
is there a way to
for dedicated staff? Because obviously Ms. Godwin's not going to make that decision. But could we put forward, I'm asking all of us a question here, is that appropriate for us to put forward that kind of a recommendation? You're looking at me with a bit of a scowl, Mr. Neptune.
There is no scowl on this
Okay,
face, Mr.
good to
Thomas.
hear,
Let
good
me
to hear.
clarify what you're bearing witness to. I think that I'm listening
Okay.
to the conversation that is unfolding, and I think that, the commission always reserves the right to exert itself in its advisory capacity, and it could very well be that this is a moment, right, to speak up very clearly and distinctly with regard to this subject matter. So, again, right now, I'm actively listening to the conversation that's unfolding. And, I just would like to acknowledge, I appreciate the questions and the conversation that has been, let's say, evoked, but would also like to express my gratitude to Ms. Godwin, Mr. Shoemaker, our colleagues on staff. At the end of the day, staff is following through at the direction and the guidance of council, in terms of policy, in terms of funding and priority. And so I have a lot of respect and appreciation for, staff having to navigate this particular dialogue, with the commission, in that, the staff cannot get ahead of, departmental leadership, city management leadership, and then ultimately council. So but here again, that's when it comes back to us as a commission. I mean, literally, it is in the language here of our nomenclature. We are an advisory body, and so this could be an opportunity for us, if it's the will of the commission, which I'm increasingly getting the sense it may be, to perhaps offer that as a note to our colleagues on council. Ms. Clark, I see a hand raised.
Yes, and while there are the importance of cleaning the protected bike lanes is very important, do we have data related to the cleaning of all bike lanes? And is there any priority within the transportation department to clean non-protected bike lanes on a particular basis? Because if this board were to make a request, I would hope it would be broad enough that it covered both kinds of bike lanes rather than just the protected bike lanes, because the unprotected bike lanes are particularly subject to gravel and sand tied to development. And when development happens, they have to put in a bike lane, and so it's sort of a catch-22. And I think our bike lanes need to have more frequent cleaning and need that priority. But do we have data on that, or is there a priority from the transportation department?
So all of our non-separated bike lanes that are in street do get swept through normal street sweeping processes, which typically I think we get to streets twice a year.
So to be real specific, there's no priority for cleaning bike lane marked streets more frequently than regular streets.
So at this time, we don't have any one person dedicated to either, separated or non-separated. The goal of this pilot was to really deploy our newly purchased equipment that was purchased for the challenges that come with the separated facilities from a maintenance perspective. But they also in hand, can be used for non-separated facilities. Our downtown sweeper pictured here has even been used on sidewalks. So they have a multifaceted purpose and can definitely be used for other reasons outside of the separated bike lanes and have been used that way.
Ms. Bravo Taylor.
I was just going to say, if we do get the chance to, however it is that we support them in trying to suggest more dedicated staff, maybe that is a good part of that discussion of, could transit look at reorganizing the priority of roads, thinking about roads with bike lanes having a higher priority, or whenever possible being more frequently cleaned? Like, that could just be a part of our request or ask or suggestion.
You know, I think that our colleagues with our planning committee could perhaps take the lead in drafting a letter of recommendation, perhaps, is one way to describe it, that we could then deliver to our colleagues on council as a sort of formal, advisement on behalf of this commission. Should our colleagues on planning committee be so interested, I certainly would be interested to see this language in black and white on paper, because I do think it's of particular interest of this commission. And again, it is a part of the role in which we serve. I mean, really and truly. And so if there's a colleague within our planning committee that would like to take the lead.
And I'm actually thinking maybe this is with policy.
Is that right, Ms. Gellenbeck?
I'm only saying.
Well, as it happens, our planning committee, certainly here represented by a number of its members, though its chair, Commissioner Tong, is not here to speak, let's say, up on behalf of the committee. The chair of the policy committee, Mr. Caruso, is here. Perhaps he could share a thought or two as it relates to drafting such a letter, perhaps in partnership with colleagues on planning committee.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to write, a letter or an outline or something. I mean, I totally agree with the gist of the commentary, that I think that this is something that BPAC should try to at least, more explicitly make known to City Council that this is kind of an ongoing issue that has been raised multiple times, both from members of BPAC and from the public coming forward to BPAC. So, yeah, I mean, I'm fine putting together just a summary letter.
And yeah, and I really do, I was serious when I was mentioning the policy, because it's beyond just planning. It's about implementing something that has a permanency to it, that that it's written into the maintenance schedule about the importance of and the value for keeping these modes of transportation lanes clear of debris. We've brought it up, like you said, Joe, many times. And honestly, when we were purchasing those sweepers, it never dawned on me that we would not have hired staff. I remember, being teased about applying for the position. And yeah, I would if I was aware of it. So thank you so much, Joe, for taking on that suggestion. And I do hope that we are elevating the conversation so that we can bring it to our council and our government staff about how important this issue is.
Ms. Stern?
I just have a question. Do you know if the sweeper has been continued to be used since the pilot, or was it kind of like they used it to collect the data and then it hasn't been going out since?
So they are finishing up leaf collection season, started in November. I don't know how it has been used since the pilot ended, strictly because a lot of their time and resources go to leaf collection. So I don't have an answer for that right now.
I have one more quick question
Mr. Thomas.
regarding the data. Were the sweeps directed, or were they on any kind of schedule? Were they in response to a request to have that particular road swept, or was it sort of like, we have this time period, when people are available, go sweep these 6 streets?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
When time was available and they could deploy
So
staff.
essentially regardless of the condition of the bike lane, they would go out and sweep it again as time permitted. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's fair to say. I do think they made a very strong effort to get people out there as much as possible.
I'm just kind of wondering about the time difference between, say sweep 1 on Lineberry versus sweep 2, 3, and 4, and because debris accumulates more at certain times, and if you've just swept and then you go, a week later and do it again, I just interested to see how that would kind of impact this data. So, but thank you, I appreciate it.
Any further comment or question from the commission? Well, hearing and seeing none, I'd like to again thank Ms. Godwin for her time in sharing this review of the bicycle lane sweeper pilot project. I'd also like to thank our colleagues on the commission for, what I think is ultimately an effort made at a constructive dialogue, okay? I mean, we are confronting a challenge that ultimately is a reflection of the efforts of this commission and our colleagues on staff to invest in bike lane infrastructure in this city, to improve that connectivity, to improve that accessibility, and I think we're realizing, hey, now we got to maintain it, and we've got to maintain it in a way that actually encourages its continued use, right? And so I do think it's totally appropriate. I want to thank Mr. Caruso for taking the lead in drafting this letter or this note to our colleagues on council. And I trust that our colleagues on the commission who are, let's say, as passionate as Mr. Caruso is and the rest of us, they'll join him in reviewing the draft, and I certainly look forward to seeing it and hopefully having something here within, between now and our next commission meeting, we can kind of review together. So looking forward to that. Thank you. With that, I believe we have arrived at our reports. On behalf of the commission, I'll kick us off with a brief chair's report. As it happens, I've had the pleasure of participating in a number of meetings, including with our colleagues on staff here, to discuss, active transportation, various studies that are underway, the downtown mobility study, the upcoming, active transportation plan that we're going to get underway here soon, and how timely, perhaps the comment here about, adopting a better policy with regard to the maintenance of our bike lane infrastructure could be adopted in such a plan. Again, looking forward to the public engagement on that. Participated in a Year of the Trail celebration at Dix Park, where we acknowledge this 2023 campaign to celebrate and advance all of the trails here in North Carolina. Our own Governor Cooper showed up for the celebration and had lots of very positive things to say about the work that we're all engaged in, and seeing our trail system improved upon and expanded across the state of North Carolina. Was on a call with our own council member, Jane Harrison, who's also our Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission liaison, discussing our efforts here with the commission, which she's deeply grateful for, and had some updates on the call about our own Miss Aerosmith, who continues to be appreciative of the work of the commission and being so sincerely engaged with her so many months ago. And let me see. Oh, well, I had the pleasure of joining Mr. Smith and Ms. Godwin for his orientation. And so, yeah, it's been a very nice past month of work here as the chair. Up next, Planning Committee. I feel like I've got no updates from Planning, so perhaps we can keep moving fairly swiftly. No updates from Policy Committee. I'm seeing Mr. Caruso shake his head. And I've got 3 pending items from Outreach Committee. Mr. Thomas, do you want to share your items?
We did not meet this past month, but I do have some things to share. So first up is the endorsement of the Clean Transportation Ordinance. This was brought to the commission, I believe, back in the fall originally, and we were not able to vote on this to support it last meeting because we didn't have a quorum. The draft letter is in our packet, and if everyone feels that it's appropriate to go ahead and vote on the support of this ordinance and the letter, I would love to have a motion to do so. If you would like more time, that's also an option.
It is an option. Well, do we have a motion from the commission to approve this draft letter of support for the Clean Transportation Ordinance. I see Mr. Caruso with
So
that comment.
moved.
Oh, we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Second. We have a second from Ms. Goodwin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, hearing none, Mr. Thomas, your motion stands approved.
All right.
Nicely done, sir.
Excellent. Next up, we have been given an opportunity by city staff to provide some exceptionally valuable input to the bike plan. I think it's going to be an active transportation plan, to provide them a value statement that will guide the development and implementation and execution of this plan over the years. I have put together a draft that addresses primarily the bike side of it. And I think what I would like to do is put together a draft encompassing bike and pedestrian, other modes of active transportation, and share this with the full commission so that I can get your input and improvements on this, and we can move this item along sooner rather than later. Does that seem like an appropriate course of action?
It does. It does. It does. So are you looking, I want to be very clear about this, would you like the commission to, or would you like a commissioner, or would you like somebody to take the lead on drafting that pedestrian sort of related value statement?
I would
or
be
that
happy to have someone else take the lead on that if I'm able to do it, but I would be happy to have other input at this stage, certainly.
Okay, so it sounds like the question before the commission, do we have a commissioner who'd be interested in supporting Mr. Thomas's work here in leading the drafting of this value statement that will inform our active transportation plan, our ultimate plan here coming up, but with a specific focus on sort of pedestrian and other active forms of transportation? Do we?
You're looking.
Oh, Mr. Smith.
You're looking for the other half. You don't
Right,
know the whole-
right. And this will be, think of it as sort of a preamble, if you will, to the ultimate active transportation plan that is
I'll
developed.
take a crack at it.
Hey,
That sounds great. That
Mr.
sounds
Smith.
great.
Well, thank you, Mr. Smith, for taking that on. You know, I do believe that this is an important sort of opening salvo, if you will, the sort of mission and vision statement that this commission carries, along with our colleagues on staff, for our future active transportation plan. So many thanks to Mr. Smith. That's his first official task on behalf of the commission. Any other updates, Mr. Thomas?
Yes, indeed. Let's see here. Sorry, looking at my notes. Participated in a focus group on February 20th, along with several other BPAC commissioners on Greenway wayfinding. That was conducted by Tool Design, who I think are doing a great job, by the way. Very excellent exercises. The Greenway Committee met. We had a presentation again from Tool Design on plans for updating the Greenway pocket map. Many of you have seen the pocket map over the years. They are also taking on this project to update the pocket map and the wayfinding. There's some overlap, but I think there's some great synergies that are coming out of that. And I think they are still seeking input on the pocket map. There's a link on the City of Raleigh's page to do a survey, so I encourage all of you to do that. Ms. Godwin, perhaps we could share that link with the full commission. That would be helpful. And then I met with the North Carolina State University Bike Working Group last Friday to discuss safe and secure bike parking on campus. So, and that concludes my report.
Very nice. Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for all your work on behalf of the commission through outreach and engagement. Up next, staff reports.
No report for me tonight.
No report.
But we know you're very busy. Despite there being no reports, we do know and trust. Up next, we're wrapping up here with board comments and announcements. Do we have any general board comments and announcements? See, Ms. Gellenbeck.
Yeah, thank you. So it's been a busy month, and I bring home information from what I observed in other cities. I was in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and they had speed bumps over their roads, the two-lane roads, and there was an opening that looked like where a bicycle rider could go through it, but the location was about 2/3 towards the center, closer, was a third from the center line, and then the 2/3 away from the outside of the road. And I thought, well, that's kind of silly. Why would they put the bike lane closer to the center of the lane instead of in the middle? And what I've come to learn is that they located the clearing of the bike lane so that emergency vehicles could ride down the center of the road and not be impacted by the speed bump. So on the opposing traffic lane, the same occurred where that opening in the speed bump was again 1/3 from the center of the line. And I thought that was really, a great solution for enabling motor vehicles, emergency vehicles, to continue having the speed that they need, while also reducing the general public's traffic speed through the speed bump. So I wanted to share that with you guys. Not sure if that's been something on your radar before, but it was cool.
Yeah, so we actually just started deploying speed cushions. It's effectively the same concept, where instead of just having 2 slots in the middle, it depends on the road width. There's between 2 and 4 cushions that are designed so that single occupancy vehicles can't straddle, whereas larger fire trucks, transit vehicles, solid waste can all straddle that. So if you go look at the first batch really went out this past spring. So if you go to Clark Avenue, Roanoke Park Drive, Marsh Lane Way,
Oh, yeah.
All of those, it's the exact same concept. So basically, we're everywhere that there's a neighborhood bikeway, we're starting to deploy those, but we're working with our fire department to see if that should be just our general best practice for vertical traffic calming everywhere. So that's actively being evaluated and discussed, but it's still new to Raleigh, so we got to get people on board and do our own tests and let people touch and feel them. So absolutely same concept, not exactly the same design, but we think that's a great potential positive future to hopefully meet almost all the needs that we can. So.
Yeah, that's a great update. Thanks. The other city that I visited was Manhattan, and I'd used their bus services, and they have a red asphalt dedicated bus lane and not protected. And let me tell you, everybody was in the red bus lane. There was no observation or politeness about keeping it free. Motor vehicle drivers parked their vehicles in it. Delivery trucks were in it. Those bus drivers had to weave back into the regular lanes. And I thought this was an aha moment for cities to learn from others who have already deployed a dedicated bus lane, that with it not being protected, it's just like our bike lanes here. I thought that was fascinating. Like, we should really consider it, because I know that that's kind of been in the drawings or the plans. Okay, another little thing that I did was ride my bike on Ridge Road, and there was a motor vehicle car parked in the bike lane. And so I took a picture of it and I posted it. And what I also took a picture of is the no parking in the bike lane sign, and it's very faded. And so I wanted to propose replacing them if it's in the budget, and adding more to it so that that bike lane on Ridge Road is protected.
We can absolutely work with our signs and marking staff to get that replaced, because there are retroflectivity standards. So if you ever see a sign that is faded, please let us know. Ridge Road is a legacy street that allows parking in bike lanes at certain times. So depending on when you were, that car could have been there legally. It's something a practice that we no longer permit, and we're looking to see what the future of those, I don't know, maybe 5-ish streets that have historically allowed parking in them look like. It's not something that we want to continue, but I'm not sure what the path forward is. But we'll absolutely look to get all the signs along Ridge Road evaluated and updated where deemed necessary.
And also increased, because I think that the frequency of them also helps the general public to recognize. It was, no parking is allowed between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., if I'm correct. And so the photo is definitely in the middle of the day. It's bright and sunny. So they were illegally parked, and
Okay.
I don't want to take the time to call the police and track them down. I don't know if that's I don't know. I'm just tired of doing that.
Well, that is the best recommendation that we can give you, is to call the police when you see illegal behavior, because they have the enforcement capabilities to take
Fair
it.
enough. I agree. I attended Campo's Blueprint to Safety conference that was hosted last week. It was really engaging. I enjoyed it a lot. There were representatives from across the region and shared ideas. So that was really encouraging to participate in their program. I also participated in the Oaks and Spokes advocacy group. They focused was on the bicycle network. And the reason why I wanted to share that is because it kind of reflected the experience I had with the Walnut Creek wayfinding signs that was hosted. And in the exercise, we identified destinations that people would be cycling to in order to determine where the wayfinding signs would be most effective and what would be posted on the wayfinding signs. And in the exercise with Oaks and Spokes, we also identified, and what we started to see was the pattern of destinations and then finding the routes to get the people to them using bicycling and walking. So I found that to be really interesting, and I wanted to share that. Identifying based on how many were in a certain area, retail, professional services, and schools seem to stand out the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gallenbeck. Mr. Thomas?
Yes, can we get an update on the status of the sidewalk program? I know that the petition program was halted. It doesn't have to be right now, but what are we doing there? I really don't know.
There's going to be an update to council in April, I believe the first meeting, but sometime in April, staff is going to be bringing an update about the sidewalk petition program and the sidewalk in general to council to get policy direction so that we can craft policy and then start moving again, because we do need to start building more sidewalks quickly as possible. So that is coming to council here very soon.
Okay. And I trust any opportunity for us to engage, BPAC to engage, you'll let us know. I hope that bring that before us. And okay.
And hopefully that'll be included in the active transportation plan.
Absolutely. And so separate tracks
right.
with the active transportation plan, and as the pedestrian element gets added to that, there will be a major component for you all on the commission to participate, as well as public engagement that takes into account the stationary planning, kind of that our friends or partners from the planning department were talking about to help prioritize projects to get those last mile things down.
Right.
So a lot of separate efforts, but all intertwined.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate the need for last mile efforts and connectivity there, but I mean, gaps in the sidewalk system remain that have been there for years outside of, BRT areas and frequent transit areas. So I hope we don't neglect those areas that have been without sidewalks for years. So, status of the Hillsborough Street bike lanes?
So we are in the process of getting a new contract to finish that work.
Okay.
The contract that work was previously under concluded during the winter season, and so the weather didn't permit being able to finish it, unfortunately, but
Okay.
that is actively underway.
All right, thank you. And then finally, I feel like we really need to take another look at the proposed bike lanes on St. Mary Street as part of the resurfacing program. As a parent of a former Broughton student, that's a very congested area at certain times of the day, and my concern is that introducing bike lanes might put people more in harm's way than less in that area, and I fear that the only thing we may succeed in doing there is making everybody unhappy. So I'm wondering if we can have planning committee look at that. They're proposed for this year, is that right?
Yes, so we are currently towards the end of the engagement period. That survey's finishing this week.
I've read the comments online, and they're not great.
Yes, we are basically at the point of final design, so there's really not much opportunity to change anything at this point.
Okay.
Brian, I am interested in hearing a little bit more of what why it would be increasing danger to put those,
Yeah, so
because
it's a-
there was two things that they were going to do. They were going to put,
Very, I mean, I'm all in favor of the raised crosswalks that
Okay.
the design calls for there. It's just, that's a very narrow street. You have lots of young, inexperienced drivers pulling in and out of Broughton onto St. Mary's. You have cars that queue up in both directions on St. Mary's twice a day, and people who are not part of that queue are very anxious and irritated and want to get around that queue, and they're not looking for people crossing. I just feel like that's putting bike lanes in there is not going to help our cause. That section doesn't make a connection, doesn't fill a gap and form a network. And so if we try to put bike lanes in there, protected lanes, it's very tight, and I feel like it increases the chance of people coming into conflict with automobiles.
okay, well.
Did that not answer your question?
No, that's good. I'm thinking about how it is a critical connector. It does lead you to P Street, and it gets you to the other side of St. Mary's, so it's another way of getting to downtown from that area.
But we don't have bike infrastructure on either end, I don't believe, at P
Well-
Street and Nichols Street. Is that the northern, Nichols or?
Yeah, it ends at Nichols, yeah.
It'll end at Nichols, but
Connects to
there,
the park up there, Fletcher Park.
But it connects to.
Doesn't the other side of Peace, or,
There-
I mean, of St. Mary's have the one lane?
There's a neighborhood bikeway across Wade, north of Wade.
I think too, the hope of the bike lanes and the raised crosswalks was also trying to just shift the overall hecticness of, like, trying to also introduce like a calming part of that street was the hope. I feel like was part of what we discussed when we were hoping that the bike lanes would help with that and give more students and other people the opportunity to not be in a car on that portion
Right.
if they don't have to. But yeah, I do know there is hectic traffic, so
Yeah,
we'll see.
I mean, I appreciate where we are in the process. It's just, it's something that I hope we can pay attention to, and it's a point of concern for me.
That one's going to be protected, right? It's going to have the plastic.
It will be, yes, it will be buffered, and then we will go back after resurfacing and add the separation.
I do wonder, so I'm not super, I mean, I'm familiar with the area, but not all the dynamics around Broughton, but like, I assume that during school pickup, a lot of parents kind of park, so to speak, in like the shoulder parking area. Is that correct? So I guess what I'm getting at is like, it is what they're doing now kind of illegal anyways, but they're just getting away with it? Like how do we envision, because like, you know, I'm sure plenty of people are upset about it. I haven't read all the comments yet, but I kind of assume. But I guess my question is like, how do we envision that being resolved, right? Because like people aren't going to suddenly stop driving to school,
No.
right? So like, where are those people going to go the day after the bollards go up? Like, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Right.
do they just kind of circle the neighborhood for 3 hours, or like?
They queue up on St. Mary's, across Peace, the line forms, and, the people who are not interested in waiting in line, of course, they just go into the other lane of oncoming traffic.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so the bike lanes aren't going to, that's not part of solving that problem. That problem's going to remain.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that it makes it worse because you get rid of that kind of shoulder area where presumably they're parking their vehicles where like they shouldn't be probably, but like they are, right? Because like if
I don't think the bike lane is going to eliminate that shoulder area queuing up. I think that's still going to happen.
well,
in
there'll
the
be a
center
buffer
of the
there, so
road.
they can't park in it.
Well,
Is what I'm
that'll be
saying.
on the southbound side, though, right?
Oh, you're talking south of Peace.
South St. Mary's.
On St. Mary's, but south of Peace, though.
No, north of Peace.
Okay.
So the design as currently proposed pulls the southbound buffered bike lane to the southern entrance of Broughton, at that driveway near Peace. And then they merge into a Sharrow condition as they approach the intersection at Peace. And the lane configuration at Peace Street and St. Mary's does not change that approach. The section between Peace Street and Brooklyn is currently proposed as a shared space. After further engagement with businesses on that 700 block of St. Mary Street, we took a second look at the design and proposed a reroute through neighborhood streets for a neighborhood bikeway connection to Peace into downtown. So the northbound approach is not a buffered bike lane between Peace and Brooklyn, but that on-street parking will stay.
Right, and the plan doesn't remove any on-street parking, right?
No.
Right. I'm raising this concern not in reaction to the comments online that I read. It's from my experience, having spent a lot of time there as a parent, and being very concerned as, you know, my son had to cross that street to get to school and back. And I think the crosswalks, raised crosswalks, will be great, and I hope that they have the intended traffic calming effect.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Caruso?
Thank you. I did have a note about the flexi posts on Capitol at Calvary, the new ones that were installed like 2 months ago, maybe. I noticed recently that, kind of unsurprisingly, a good chunk of them have already been destroyed. So is there, can we find out what the plan is for that? Like, are those going to be, I guess, first of all, is the city responsible for maintenance of that, or is that DOT? And second, like, what is the plan? I mean, obviously, you know, we could replace them, but I think, as we mentioned at the time, you know, this was kind of foreseeable. So, I mean, is there any kind of updates or plans on kind of putting in kind of concrete curb extensions or anything? Because, you know, most of those flexi posts have lasted maybe a month, if that. So especially on the eastbound, or especially on the east side, around the bus stop, pretty much all of those flexi posts are gone already.
So there is a bus stop redesign where I believe there's going to be some additional curb work that's still being in design and going towards construction. We can get an update because that's being processed through the Vision Zero and transit groups. We are responsible, to the best of my knowledge, for replacing and updating all signs and markings in the city of Raleigh. So if you see something, let us know. Our crews do ride around and do inventory, but we have thousands and thousands and thousands of streets. So assuming that we just know that every sign is down is not the best course of action. So see Click Fix, emailing the transportation website, reaching out to Barbara or myself, and we can get it to the right people. But we can certainly reach out to the signs and marking group and let them know that the flexi posts are down and request that they're replaced, as well as provide an update with the Vision Zero about what their project and the transit project.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Thank you, Mr. Caruso. Any further comment, question? Mr. Smith.
In addition to being on this commission, I'm also the chairperson for advocacy and legislative affairs for North Carolina Council of the Blind. And in that capacity, we are organizing a White Cane Day, which is October 15th. And we're going to try to get the city of Raleigh involved and the governor's office and people in the legislature. And I just wanted to let everyone know about that. Mark that on your calendar, and please consider being involved in some way, and I'll get back to you in the future with what we have. And I have a couple of concerns I wanted to raise. One is the off-ramp from 440 to Six Forks Road. The on-ramp on the south side and the off-ramp on the north side. I've been walking for 35 years, and that's the worst intersection safety-wise I've ever seen, especially on the north side, the off-ramp. It's not marked in any way. There's no crosswalk signs. There's no markings on the street. And it's a double right turn lane. And I was told that because the MUTCD says you can't turn right on red in a double right turn lane, that they actually can't put a sign up to remind drivers not to turn, that it's no turn on red. And I find that very frustrating. And to me, that's extremely counter vision zero. It's zero vision is what it is. I understand from talking to Mr. Driscoll that that intersection is due for a rehab, not in conjunction with the Six Forks Road project, which doesn't start till north of East Roland Street. But I was also told it's going to be 16 to 18, 24 months. I don't know. Who knows? A couple years. And 50 people died in Raleigh in 2022 and 2023 getting struck by vehicles. And, I mean, that's crazy, outrageous number of people to die that way. And I don't know. I moved here and I first brought it up. I moved here last year. I first brought it up in September. And, you know, I've been stonewalled. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. We can't do anything. It's all going to get fixed eventually. Just wait. And meanwhile, anybody who comes to that cross is going to have a lot of trouble. It's 2 miles from my house to Wegmans. It's extremely walkable, but I will never walk there because of that intersection. I can't get through it. It's terrifying. It's 20 yards wide. The intersection, the lane is almost 45 degrees. It's double right turn. There's no right turn on red sign there, no right turn on red sign. So drivers, when they pull up next to each other, over what would have been the crosswalk, but there's no marking, and they're looking to the left because they're trying to turn right on red to get out quick in front of the traffic. So because of the angle of the intersection, their heads are turned to anybody. The back of their head is turned to anybody coming down the street. I mean, I'm willing to wait for everything to be perfect for a couple of years, but in the meantime, it's a risky location. And anybody who goes there is going to risk their lives getting across. And I've been there and taken photographs of it, and there's what they call a goat path, which I kind of resent because pedestrians aren't goats. But it shows you where everybody goes. Nobody's comfortable crossing where the ped head is. They walk 10 or 15 yards down the ramp and cross between cars that are backed up to turn right, and then walk back up to the bridge and go across. And I'm really frustrated with the kind of lack of urgency when I pointed this out. First time I saw it, I was like, wow, this is incredible. And it kind of goes to another issue, which is all over the city, there are almost no crosswalks marked. I mean, if you do it by the numbers, there are hundreds of crosswalks that are marked, but there are hundreds and hundreds more that are not marked. And that, for pedestrians, is a particular issue because drivers pull out too far trying to pull into traffic. Six Forks is, the whole stretch of Six Forks is an example. And there's no markings there that say this is intended for pedestrians. So they pull over it, and when you get there, you have to either walk in front of the car, which I try never to do, but it's actually the safest thing to do because if you walk behind the car, anybody turning can't see you. And it sounds like a trivial issue to put some paint down in those areas, but it's not. It's a major issue for pedestrians. And I just wanted to raise that concern, those two, the 440 intersection and just in general, the fact that there are so many of the intersections don't have markings at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. You know, I do want to acknowledge how much I, again, imagine this commission will come to appreciate your voice and your advocacy, especially with relation to, frankly, the greater community that is actively trying to make its way on foot or just, you know, around the city actively without a bike. You know, I think so much of the conversation over the years for this commission has been sort of rooted in cycling, in part because that's a very organized and active and engaged community. I mean, I think many of us, Ms. Gallenbeck mentioned having attended an Oaks and Spokes event. I see the Oaks and Spokes board chair and president right there in the audience, Mr. Kwan Yu Chen. And obviously we're grateful for the work and the advocacy of Oaks and Spokes and our cyclists. But at the end of the day, we all start off, you know, making our way typically on foot. And so, you know, whatever we can do to improve our active transportation network for those of us who are walking around the city, I mean, ultimately we're making improvements for everybody. And so, you know, the timeliness of you joining us is really remarkable because we're gearing up for all of this work with the active transportation plan. As it happens in May of 2024, if I'm not mistaken, this commission will have its annual retreat where we'll take a moment to, you know, review and acknowledge the work of the past year with regard to our work plan, but we will begin to set the agenda for our work in the year ahead. And so, you know, again, it's just quite timely to have you joining us right now. And maybe perhaps on that note, if I'm not mistaken, it might be helpful to identify a specific date in May for our retreat because we typically will choose, let's say, a Friday. Oftentimes, we'll choose a Friday, you know, to get together for, you know, more than just an hour or two, as we normally do with our commission meetings. We like to have enough time to, again, review the work of the past year, plan out our work plan for the year ahead. You know, oftentimes we'll have maybe a couple presentations from staff or you know, others, and then of course we'll also have our nominations for the next iteration of our chair and vice chair leadership for the commission. So let me take a moment to maybe pivot to our colleagues on staff. Would this be a good time to discuss as a commission dates in May that work for us? I think Ms. Godwin, perhaps you may already have a couple dates in May that might work for our colleagues on staff. Is that right? If everybody could maybe take a look at your calendars. Ms. Godwin, any immediate thoughts on dates in May?
So definitely don't need a response right now, but just take these dates and think about them. But Friday, May 17th is up for consideration. And I believe the 10th as well, Friday, May 10th.
So we have Friday the 10th of May and Friday the 17th of May. And this would be from, could you tell us the times again, roughly?
In the past, we've done morning, so
That's
like
right.
9 to 12.
Like 9 to noon, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, any initial thoughts on those? Reflect on them, and we can circle back. Yeah.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I think I'm hearing voices in the affirmative for those dates. Do either of those dates not work for members of the commission? May 10th does not work? And okay, so it sounds like we might lose one or the other, and obviously every member of this commission is deeply valued and appreciated, so would prefer not to lose anybody if possible.
May 3rd was also an option.
May 3rd is also an option? Oh. Could we check? May 3rd is good? Oh, I'm seeing 2 thumbs up on May 3rd. Commissioner Thomas? Okay. Mr. Smith, sounds good to you? Colleagues? Oh, hello. May 3rd might be our... What's that, Ms. Barbara Taylor? Let's try to hold that, yeah. Oh, let's hold May 3rd. Let's hold May 3rd.
Thank you, commissioners.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Where it ticks? Where are we?
Well, I'm actually going to check the calendar for the Flower Cottage at the park right now for May 3rd. Oh, boy. Well, guess who's going to put a hold on the cottage right as we speak? I happen to have access to our calendar. Y'all know I love to host. You know I love to host at the cottage. May 3rd, 9 to noon. Love that for us. Well, this is working out nicely. And that's First Friday, too. First Friday. I tell you, we could perhaps go out that night if we wanted to, have a little celebration. All right, now. Do we know what hours, Barbara? 9 to noon?
Yeah, we're flexible, but.
But flexible. Okay. All right. So it looks like we have 9 to noon on May 3rd, Friday the 3rd. We are setting that time aside for our BPAC retreat with our colleagues on staff. Well, with that, we are here now, just a few minutes past 8.
May I ask one quick question?
Yeah, Mr. Thomas.
pertaining to
Oh, and then
Mr.
Ms.
Smith's
Clark.
Comments.
Yeah.
Could you give us an update on what is the process for requesting crosswalks at either city-controlled streets or NCDOT-controlled streets?
You would email and request it. You could do a C-click fix, and then Rebecca Duffy, who's over the signs and markings, will go out there and we'll do a pedestrian count. If it meets those warrants, it will get marked. If it's under stop control, we can go ahead and or some sort of signalization control, we can largely go and mark it. There is an ADA component where we have to make sure that the ramps are upgraded. If they are not, they'll go on a list for updating and then they'll go marking. So really it's just reaching out and making a request and staff will evaluate.
But it has to meet the warrants or the number of pedestrians crossing.
There are a number of checks that we do, but yes.
Do they use a counter, a pedestrian counter, or does a person actually go out there and sit with a clicker?
We videotape it and then watch the tape. So we physically count.
And
I mean, so at that location that Mr. Smith recommended, I mean, that's certainly something, again, that's not going to be an ADA compliant crossing. So it would have to be where you're saying it's dangerous. Those are both DOT streets. We'll be happy to have that coordination talk with them
Well, I was
to
just
see
looking
what we
for
can do.
remediation until it's updated.
And-
You know, just a sign that says this is a crosswalk and a sign that says you can't turn right on red here,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe two white lines, a pedestrian lane, if you will, you know?
Absolutely, that's in the notes. We're going to follow up with our counterparts at the NCDOT and make that request of them.
Thank you.
So I did have a follow-up question about the Six Forks one. Are you speaking about westbound to northbound?
Westbound 440,
Right, to north, to north,
exit, at the exit at
and then
Six
the right up into North Hills?
Yeah, the one that goes
Yeah,
right there at North Hills, yeah.
yeah, because I was looking at it, and there's obviously a red light and there's sidewalks on both ends, so it should meet the requirements.
yeah.
I mean, there's not a crosswalk already. I mean, there's also not a ped signal, which is
But- and
troubling.
The on-ramp on the other side of the bridge is bad too, but.
Right,
there's
but
something
that one's
about
not
it.
controlled though, I think.
There's sidewalk. I mean, there may not be a ped head. I haven't really, honestly, I haven't gone over there because I can't get over there.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was thinking about the south of the Beltline. It's just a free flow onto the Six Forks.
There's no signal.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, going on the westbound, I mean, it's out of signal with sidewalks on both ends, so yeah, I mean, it
I
should.
don't know what
it
the
should
crash
qualify.
history is there.
Yeah.
I haven't seen what the crash history is there, but there certainly must be one.
Yeah.
Well, that's still a very long crossing to make, and
Yeah.
the goat path looks like a much safer option to me.
Yeah. I mean,
Can you see it on the
Yeah.
satellite?
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very awkward intersection too, because
Yeah,
you
you're about
because you
45
come in
degree
at
angle.
at an angle. I mean, even
DOT has already said, we're not going to change the alignment of the lane, and I understand that, but still.
Right.
But we can't do the perfect, so we're not going to do anything.
Right.
right. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we're talking about the same place.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Clark?
I just wanted to commend I was riding on Hillsborough Street the other day, and in the 400 block, there is the new bike lane that is adjacent to the sidewalk and protected by the car. However, that's being such a dramatic change, and I think it's the only one block I've seen, it seemed to me that it would be an appropriate place to put some signs that said look and maybe googly eyes or something, because the passenger isn't as aware of where they've pulled into as the driver is in the reverse setup. And so even though most of our cars are only drivers and not pedestrians too, we need to educate our not pedestrians, but passengers. We need to educate the passengers to look before they open their door, so that we don't run into that kind of
Same problem.
problem.
Yeah, so speaking of that area, I did see on Twitter a few weeks ago that, I know that these are brand new facilities, so it may just be in progress, but can we follow up on, is there plans to put down flexi posts in that little strip there? Because I noticed that there's already a number of people who are parking, they're pulling all the way to the curb, and we can be charitable and say they just didn't know better, but the way considering it's kind of a new type of facility and the way it's laid out, it may not be obvious that you're not supposed to do that. So can we find out kind of what the plans are for flexis or whatever we're going to put there?
Yes, so eventually we will go back and add that in, some type of vertical delineation.
Thank you. Any further comment from the commission? Ms. Goodwin? I see you. No, please, bring it on, bring it on.
I'll be a little bit late. Oh. I'm sorry, I missed something on the calendar.
That is okay. It is good to know in advance. We will consider that an excused delay. Okay. Well, and I think we honestly have the capacity, if I'm not mistaken, to adjust our time. I mean, we said 9 to noon, but I don't think there's anything precluding us from saying like 10 to 1.
Yeah, I think that should be fine.
I mean, is there any objection from the commission? Hearing none, I think we should just make the adjustment. Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you. Again, every member of this commission deeply valued and appreciated. We're all volunteering our time here and working with our colleagues on staff and council to improve our public infrastructure. Honestly, truth be told, me too, y'all. I mean, let's be honest. My sleep time is better. Yeah.
It's easy to ride a bike in that time, too.
No, this is working out. This is coming up to commission. All right now. Okay. With that, any further comment or question? Hearing none, let's talk about upcoming events. I do have one, again, courtesy our friends with Oaks and Spokes. I'll be hosting with the Raleigh Brewing, our friends at Raleigh Brewing at 7 o'clock tomorrow night, an event on friendly drivers, a friendly driver program, I think with our colleagues from Bike Walk NC. Bike Walk NC will be at Raleigh Brewing in partnership with Oaks and Spokes, hosting an evening talking about friendly driver programs organized by Bike Walk NC. That's tomorrow evening, the 19th, 7 o'clock. Any other upcoming events for the good of the commission and the public? Hearing and seeing none, let's confirm our next Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission meeting. It'll be on Monday, April 15th, 2024, 6 o'clock, right here in council chambers, unless otherwise advised. Otherwise, with that, any objection to making an adjournment of the meeting? Hearing and seeing none, my friends, the commission is adjourned. Thank you.